The Dragon Lord's Consort Chapter 13. The Trial of the Consort Part 3. Torch, the giant dragon, a mountain of a dragon rather, the last dragon prior to his daughter, was the first to start the trials. The other three larger dragons cleared the way as the former Dragon Lord cleared his way towards the center, where all the dragons were able to see the center. It was here that Spike and Ember stood, Ember holding her staff, while Spike was shaking as hundreds of dragons cheered, or rather roared at them. "Wow, I have a lot of dragons to disappoint," he said out loud without meaning to. Ember gave a small snort of disapproval. "You have no one to disappoint, but you do have every Drake to impress. No matter the outcome, you will never disappoint me." "Only because I'm your consort?" "Because I'm your friend," she answered. "Because I care for you, and what your future holds it's up to you." He regarded her with a smile, not reassuring, but enough to know that he wasn't alone. Torch gave a roar loud enough to shake the ground and cause all the dragons around to quiet down. With the silence followed, he cleared his throat. "As the former Dragon Lord, I will be the first one to give young Spike here the first trial. After which he has completed it, the others will follow with theirs. I am aware of how previous trials were held through strength, stamina, speed, and so on. However, with the current age and size of our younger dragons here, we will have to minimalize the inducing tasks." Spike's eyes went wide. "Wait, dragons?" He turned to Ember. "You're going to participate in this too? I thought it was just me," he half yelled. Ember shook her head. "These trials, they're yours, but I will only be in part wherever I'm needed. You must prove your devotion, not just to the dragons, but to me as well. I am to be a reason for you other than just something as a simple title or the riches." Spike wanted to say more, but Torch spoke before them all. "For the first trial, Spike must endure how strong his will is." Torch's giant eyes looked towards him before lowering his head down near towards his level. "You will go through the Isle of Fury, where the contest for the Bloodstone Scepter was held, and you must retrieve the Golden Diamond upon the center of the island." Spike blinked at that, and a small shaky laugh left him. "That doesn't sound so bad." "Fate jinxed the fool who tempted it. It will be no simple task. Inside you will be set towards the path where you must seek it. However, there you will be surrounded by hordes and other treasures that will be in your way. The trial, simple as you may think, will have you try to go through it all and retrieve the Golden Diamond without falling to temptation or greed to hoard it all for yourself. That is just for the piles itself, but the true trial lies at the end." Spike gulped. Surrounded by other hordes and treasures and not become greed-filled? I mean, he barely managed to deal with his greed growth a while back, but how could he hope to do this? "The path will be marked towards the Golden Diamond. Bring any treasure out or hoard that is not the Golden Diamond and you will fail this. Scouts will be watching you, but will not interfere with your trial. It is your will and heart that you will try to push past it through and earn your goal. Are you ready?" Spike twinkled with his claws before turning to Ember, who gave him her best confident smile. That was all he needed, with a small amount of hope being built up into his chest. He then looked up at Torch and gave a nod. I'm ready." A nod was all he got before Torch lowered himself to the ground and laid before him. "Climb, and I will take you." He hesitated, with a giant claw hand before him. The nerves ran up and down his body, and he couldn't really help but shake. Pushing past his anxiety, Spike moved over to the giant claw and jumped right on top. He shuffled towards the middle and just sat down. Torch gave a snort before addressing the crowd. "While I watch the young Drake tackle the trial, the rest of the dragons will have their own will here until I return within the second hour." Gently closing his claw over Spike, Torch opened his giant wings and began flapping. His wings created a heavy gust of wind and dirt to spread wildly. He soon took over a hovering stance where three of the other dragons of diversity in sizes and colors quickly opened their wings, taking an easier time to meet up to Torch's head. Once airborne, Torch took off with the scouts following. Ember watched with lingering eyes of worry. She believed that Spike would succeed, and she knew that this was the easiest test to do. However, Spike has never really dealt with this much tension before, despite the amazing deeds he has done with his pony family and friends, by saving Equestria and the Crystal Empire. Those still wouldn't really come close to what he might feel and what might be the greatest choices of his life. The Isle of Fury wasn't far off from the main arena where the valley was, but then again, Torch was a giant dragon, so distance was no trouble. The fact that he was so big and could still fly, that surprised Spike. From the safety of the claws, Spike managed to peek through and see the island fast approaching. Memories of the Gauntlet of Fire resurfaced on how it was him and Ember that tackled this together. How every challenge that came to them, including Garble, was overcome by them working together. Here and now, he was alone. He was alone, and he had to do this all by himself. The former Dragon Lord approached the island and landed near a large ridge towards an opening into the island. Bringing his claw down, he opened it, allowing Spike to hop down and look towards the cave entrance. Unlike before, it was not full of activity and dragons struggling to get to the center where the Bloodstone Scepter lied. No, it was empty, quiet, and it was only lit by torches placed along the walls. So, he began, still a bit shaky at the cave. Just go in, past all the hoards and treasures, and retrieve the golden diamond? You must retrieve and return it back to me, a trial of will and strength. My scouts will be watching you and see how you fare. They will alert me once you are close by. Torch waved the claw where the three scouts were. All teenage dragons quickly flew into the cave in front of him and disappeared inside. They will not interfere nor aid you in any way during the trials. Outside of a life or death situation, they will stay out of your sight and watch until you complete the trial. Spike had noticed that Torch never said if he failed or succeeded, which made him think that Torch knew the outcome. Any advice or hints that you can, give me before I go? Torch regarded him for a moment before lowering his giant head to Spike, where he met the young Drake up close. There, Spike and Torch made eye-to-eye contact, showing something that he would always be afraid of. Yet, Torch was not really menacing, not angry, not even scary. Torch was looking at Spike with admiration and hope. In a soft voice, enough not to be so loud, he spoke to him. I, too, cannot assist you in any way for the trials. Spike wilted at that. However, Spike looked up. Should you feel yourself failing for the temptation, remember everything else but the greed. Remember your friends, your family. He paused and gave him a grin. Remember Ember, for you are doing this for her, but most importantly, remember yourself and who you are. You are a born dragon, but you were raised to be better. You will overcome this, regardless of the difficulty, and once you do, I guarantee that this will only strengthen your resolve to achieve your goals. To complete the trials. Be strong in mind, be brave in spirit, and conquer any fear with the love of your heart. Spike felt awed by Torch's words, never really hearing such strong and powerful words directed at him before. A renewal and burst of emotion filled his spirit as he felt and understood every word that Torch said. He took it all with vigor, giving him the boost he needed to himself. Go now, quickly. You must complete the trials in 2 hours. The path is lit for you, so all you must do is walk the trail there. Spike nodded. Thank you, Torch. Thank you for believing in me. Torch gave a snort. You have the heart worth more than a lot of dragons. Now, go prove it. With a final nod, Spike quickly took off into the giant cave where the first path was set with lit torches quickly followed them inside. Torch watched him go, watching him disappear inside before sighing out loud. May Draco guide you, Spike. Spike ran as fast as his little legs could. Despite the 1.5-inch growth he gained since yesterday, he still waddled through his run, but he had a bit more length to his steps, so this might help him distance-wise. He sped through the first length, seeing red markers painted across the path and the side of rocks. He followed every one that sent him deeper into the cave systems. The markers were red painted claw marks pointed towards the center where lit torches followed. It was after a few minutes of running that he finally stopped to catch his breath. He had gotten a fair distance from the cave entrance, and with his growth, he found himself with a better stamina and better breathing control. His eyes followed the markers along the floor until he found the first hoard not too far off. It was a small pile of gold coins and trinkets. His first instinct was to inspect it, but quickly shook his head and ignored it. For Ember, for me, he thought to himself. He pushed past it and continued the path. The path zigzagged through the cave, each one leading off to a different section where it was not lit or out of the set pathway. For each new turn, there was a hoard set. He noticed the further he traveled, the bigger the pile came. It was easy to ignore them being single style like gold or copper, some even pony things like statues, bits, armor plates, and so on that he dealt with daily made himself easily overlook the rest. He would have to ask where they got that later, though. He pushed through the half-hour mark where the first variety of the hordes had changed. They were now as large as a carriage, and some even spilled over with sapphires and rubies. He licked his maw as some of them glistened in the dark background with the torches giving them a flickering shine. He slowly approached the pile, practically hearing the ruby at the top of one calling his name. A single step into the pile caused him to stop. Looking down, he saw his foot on top of those loose bits. He looked down and saw the image of Celestia on one. Celestia. His mother, the one who raised him to be a good little Drake, and to think of others. She raised him alongside Twilight. That greed was never okay to allow in his heart. He dealt with that the first time he went through it with his greed growth. It nearly cost him his family and his friends. He couldn't do that here. He couldn't afford to do that. He couldn't afford to let them down. For my family, for my friends, he said to himself. He stepped off the pile and moved past it without another thought. He heard wings flapping, and looking up he saw high up into the cave system the silhouettes of the dragon scouts gliding overhead. They had been watching, waiting for his mistake to alert Torch. With no mistake, he would move on and so they would watch him. Moving on, he decided to really run now, past each new and larger horde that caught his gaze. He ran extra hard for each one that crossed his path. He would run until a path held no horde and would allow it to catch his breath there, as if not to tempt himself. He had to do this. He had to push past every single one of them. For my friends, for my family, for Ember, for me. He repeated this to himself over and over again, every time a certain ruby or shiny jewel flashed in his eyes. Each pass, however, made him sick with hunger and frustration, knowing that they would never be touched by his claws. A sapphire the size of his head, a ruby that would fill his bed, or a hail of coins that would buy out Ponyville, all were within his reach. But he pressed on. For them, for Ember, for myself, I will go on. The shadow voices and smells of various hordes would echo in the back of his mind, tickling his instincts, but his heart pushed on. With total absolution, he made his way past every horde, seeking his true goal and for the trial to be finally over. After a good solid hour of sprinting to the center, Spike found himself for the first time he had found the Bloodstone Scepter. Ironically, and too coincidental, it was right at the centerpiece where he had reached the scepter. However, no one was there to try and take it from there. Instead, a diamond, the size of his head, was held, where a radiant and bright golden glow gleamed loudly. It was brighter than most of the torches, yet he could see no energy or light pointing towards it to cast a light. "Come closer," whispered a voice. "Wait, huh?" He looked around, seeing no one. Hello?" "Come closer," the voice whispered once more. Spike realized that the voice came from the golden diamonds. The voice tickled his ears, and he wondered if it really was a voice. Cautiously, he made his way towards the jewel. The diamond seemed to glow brighter, but what confused Spike was that he held no hunger for it, at least initially. "A little closer, if you will." Spike was staring right at it. A small silhouette appeared inside the diamond. "You did it! You passed the test," said the voice, sounding excited and eerily like his own voice. Spike felt relief and exhaustion set as he heard that. I passed the trial?" "You did. You passed the trial. Now all you need to do is eat the golden diamond, and your trial will be complete." Spike gave a quizzical look at the diamond. "Wait, eat it? Torch said that I had to retrieve it and then bring it back to him after I found it." "Of course. He wants you to bring it back. He's too lazy to get it himself." The silhouette began to take shape to match Spike's. His eyes went wide as he stared at the carbon, or in this case, golden copy of himself. "Torch is too large to get in and retrieve it himself. That's why he gave you the easiest trial." Spike stared at himself through the golden diamond, and he wondered if this was true. He did ask him to bring it to him as soon as he found it, and a sudden surge of anger grew in him. The larger dragon couldn't get a stupid jewel himself. Was this part of the trials, to see if he would listen around like some mindless puppet? "Yeah," his reflection taunted. "Torch just sent you on an errand run. Kinda like how all our friends back home used to treat us, like we're slaves, like we're just a body back to throw around, you know?
If we eat the diamond, we could become strong and tall like Torch. Imagine that. You wouldn't need to do the trials anymore if you were his size. Any trial they throw at you, easily passed by your size.
At this point, his golden reflection took on a rather darker tone, which Spike only found alarming. He felt his mind turn dark and flashes of his past, greed, everything filled his mind. He screamed out in pain as his visions filled his mind and eyes, the past where he became a rogue dragon. Big as he was, yes, strong and powerful, that truly was grand, but the fear in his friends' eyes, that was there. All of them looking at him like a giant monster, foals running away, ponies scattering out of his path, others trying their best to fight or slow him down, but nothing worked. Torch and the other lords were gone, and the Alicorns could do nothing to stop him. He was strong, he was big, and he needed nothing else. But then, his eyes had focused on Rarity. The outcome wasn't like before, no, it was worse. It was way worse as he held her screaming in his claws, his giant palms slowly crushing her. Screams of agony left her as he brought her body towards his, mouthing for him to... "No!" he roared out, which echoed loudly in the cave. He dropped to his knees, tears threatening to drip down on his face, eyes closing tightly and shaking his head in defiance. "No, no, no, I will not be like that. I will not be like that again." He screamed out loud, his eyes opening, and he looked back towards the golden diamond, where he didn't see his darker half. Instead, he saw himself, a teen Drake crying like a newborn. It was then that he realized that this was the true test, the true face of the trial, a test of will over greed. The hordes he passed were just the small temptations that he had to pass, the easy part of the trial, but the true test came at the end where the center of the trial was. It was not just put there to coincide with the Bloodstone Scepter. It was the exact center of the isle, just like the center of one's self. He was to retrieve this, but not be tempted by the diamond's influence, to have the will to overcome it and leave here without its corruption. Sighing, Spike reached out and grabbed the giant diamond. He saw his reflection once more. A small sliver of his darker self had passed, but he ignored it. Holding it with one arm, he made his way out of the cave. He didn't notice that the cave got darker behind him, and the diamond lost its shine.